This of the new consciousness paradigm. Again, Reverend Phil Valentine.
Thank you very much, I'm not sure. Am I on?
Yes, sir.
I am. I'm on. Okay. I have so on, huh? Well, give thanks and praises, and I want to give thanks to the grassroots brothers and sisters for inviting me here. I'd like to preface my talk by saying, or at least saying a few words that has been inspired by a particular circumstance that took place last week. Now, all of you who know me and know the many years that I have been discoursing with my community and interfacing with my community, that when I do speak, I make sure that whatever subjects I speak on, I would give you points of reference, books and authors that you can go and check for yourself. And my tapes will bear me out when I say that I will tell and give the proper information to anyone, because I don't own the information. Now, I am prefacing this particular talk with love and respect, but because of what happened last week, it's necessary for me to say this. I am not now, nor have I ever been, a disciple, a student, or a prognosticator of the works or teachings of Dr. Malachi York. I must get that clear to the younger brothers and sisters, especially who don't know who I am. Because a few times in the past, a lot of them who come, who are just now getting on the path, just now awakening, don't understand the disciplines of research and what it takes for one who dedicates themselves to finding out the information no matter where it may lie. And most of the information that I've been speaking on for the last 20 years is information that is buried deep, purposefully, so that we as a people may not find the missing ingredient that connects us to the higher parts of ourselves. I am a researcher, metaphysician, and as such, I am a decoder. So I can tell you of about 3 or 4 of the top decoders that are with us, one of them being Bobby Hemmett, and he has no compunctions about telling you where his information is being touched upon or taken from, because he is using it that way as a result of the fact that most of our information is being disseminated through the Caucasoid, but with the missing ingredient. And what is that missing ingredient? Us. So we are interpreters / decoders of what it is that the dominant quote-unquote society is feeding us through the so-called New Age paradigm. Other decoders are Steve Coakley, Brother Dr. Delbert Blair. These are master decoders, ones who have helped us to sift through all of the BS and then give us the needs, or what we need, of that missing ingredient. So I'm not really focusing it on those of us who have been on this journey for a long time. I'm actually putting this on tape now because I'm sure that this tape will be disseminated amongst the community. And I said this because it dawned on me after the incident that took place at Long Island University last week, and we're here at, what's the date today? December 7th. Last week, Friday, it took place, and there are members of the circle, or the students of Dr. York, that I meet every now and then in my lectures, and because of the subject matter did I speak on? They think that the subject matter originates with Dr. Malachi York, and it doesn't. I tell them where they may go directly to find that material. Now that sets a confusion, a paradigm of confusion and a confusion premise. If information is only being given from the ingredient only and not letting the brothers and sisters who don't understand how that information came to be, or not given at least some form of history or some form of breadcrumbs to follow. So they believe that the information originates and ends with the person who teaches them, because they are confined within a particular constraint of consciousness. That is not me. I'm about breaking ceilings. And I don't care where I get the information from, because I know it all originates from one source. So I'm saying that with love and respect. And I'm going to say this for maybe about the next 3 to 4, maybe to 7 tapes or dissertations that I do, so that when these tapes are disseminated, it is understood that Dr. Malachi York does not hold a complete and total hold over the information that the brother disseminates, and that we share a common path. Check? All right. Give thanks. Now I want to use that as a segue into defining and giving a more rounded perception to why it is I wanted to speak about how it is we are being taught today, and how this so-called miseducation system got its beginning in the first place, and why it is that the system of ignorance has been so successful. I have some materials here that deals with the education system that is currently the education system used in the United States of America. This system is a derivative of the Prussian system of education. Prussian being the German system of education. Now, when the Prussians lost to Napoleon, the generals found that the reason why they lost wasn't because they weren't good soldiers. It was because everybody was thinking for themselves. Everybody was too well educated. They didn't know how to follow orders. So after that, the brainwaves and the elite, the aristocracy, began to introduce a certain education pattern to the next generations. They began to limit or put a ceiling on causing a flourishing of intelligence. When you read too much, you begin to want to inquire more. But they set it up so well that what you do read confines you anyway, because you don't believe there's anything beyond that. Now, when they did that, they did it right before the Industrial Revolution. And it was slick, because what they did was they limited the education context so that they could make good workers in the steel mills. When somebody only knows steel and how to pour this or fold this and don't have anything beyond that particular intellectual constraint, he makes a good slave. Now, using the basic philosophy, and this comes from the Prussian-German education system, mind control. Using the basic philosophy prescribed in the Duties of the State, combined with John Locke's view, which is in 1690, that children are a blank slate, and lessons from Rousseau on how to write on that slate, Prussia established a three-tiered education system that was considered scientific in nature. It began around 1807. And the system was in place by 1819. Now you have to listen carefully. Check the diabolical context and why it is that we are going through what we're going through today. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined what was to be learned, what was to be brought about, or what was to be thought about, how long to think about it, and when a child was to think of something else. Basically, it was a system of thought control, and it established a penchant in the psyche of the German elite that would later manifest itself into what we now refer to as mind control. The education system was divided into three groups. The elite of Prussian society were seen as comprising 5% of the society. Approximately 5.5 of the remaining children were sent to what was known as Readschlussen, where they were partially taught to think. The remaining 94% were the Volksschlussen, where they were to learn harmony, obedience, freedom from stressful thinking, and how to follow orders. An important part of this new system was to break the link between reading and the young child, because a child who reads too well becomes knowledgeable and independent of the system of instructions and is capable of finding out anything. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, you've got to remove the power of most people to make anything out of the available information. Now, I bring it back to my opening statement. Is people listening to what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not making any direct accusations, but I'm letting you understand that you can create a system or a ceiling to a person's awareness by taking away the different outlets and the different paths that they may pursue to make their own conclusions. Once you take away certain key information from someone, give them a base of information and a ceiling or a context of information by which to operate, that's all they know. That's all they know. This was the plan, to keep most of the children in the general population from reading for the first 6 to 7 years of their lives. Well, you say, well then, Reverend Valentine, what is all this about getting our children to read? They took it to the next harmonic. What are our children given to read? Even the stuff that they're reading now that has the quote-unquote cultural context involved, it's still about teaching our children to acclimate into the system, only having some sort of pseudo-identity. It does not teach the children to drop completely out. It does not give the children the 6 and 7 different levels necessary for them to learn. It teaches them how to conform, or at least gives them another clip in the ammunition for self-awareness. But that clip runs out, because after you've taken your own culture into this system, we have not taught our children what to do when they encounter the resistance to it. Where are the support mechanisms for them to go out and flourish based upon what we're teaching them? We still have to incorporate the system that is repressing us, but this time with our own identity. They have simply refined the madness. Now, the Prussian system of reading was originally a system whereby whole sentences, now dig the deviltry. The Prussian system of reading was originally a system whereby whole sentences, and thus whole integrated concepts, were memorized rather than whole words. In this three-tiered system, they figured out a way to achieve the desired results. In the lowest category of the system, the Volks, that means Volks means people, the Volksschlussen, or the people school, I guess, the method was to divide whole ideas, which simultaneously integrate whole disciplines like math, science, language, culture, all at once, into subjects. which hardly existed prior to that time. The subjects were further divided into units, requiring periods of time during the day. What does that sound like? Sound like your education system, doesn't it? Listen carefully. With appropriate variation, no one would really know what was happening in the world. It was inherently one of the most brilliant methods of knowledge suppression that ever existed. They also replaced the alphabet system of teaching with the teaching of sounds, hooked on phonics. Children could read without understanding what they were reading, or all the implications of what they were reading. In 1814, the first American, a Mr. Edward Everett, went to Prussia to get his Ph.D. He eventually became governor of Massachusetts. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. Now, degrees is a German. That's that German, that's that, what's that, Brother Morris, the secret society came out of Germany. Not even Illuminati, but called it before that. The Freemasons, we know what I'm talking about. We'll get right to it. Horace Mann, instrumental in developing the education system in America, was amongst this group. Horace Mann was amongst the group that went over to Germany to learn the Prussian system, the three-tiered system. Those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States and staffed all of the major universities. In 1850, Massachusetts and New York utilized the system, as well as to promote the concept that the state is the father of the children. Hello? That's what welfare is. Horace Mann's sister, Elizabeth Peabody, Peabody Foundation. Anybody look at PBS? Okay? Peabody Foundation saw to it that after the Civil War, the Prussian system taught in the northern states was integrated into the conquered South between 1865 and 1900. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. This project also meant that one-room schoolhouses had to go. Couldn't have the ma and pa teaching the children anymore. Where did you hear that system before? No. Overseas, the great demon. Who's the great red demon? Russia. This is socialism. Karl Marx. Very good. One of the reasons that the self-appointed elite brought back the Prussian system to the United States was to ensure a non-thinking workforce to staff the growing Industrial Revolution. In 1776, for example, about 85% of the citizens were reasonably educated and had independent livelihoods. They didn't need to work for anyone. In 1840, the ratio was still about maybe 70%. The attitude of learn and then strike out on your own had to be broken. The Prussian system was an ideal way of doing that. One of the prime importers of the German educational system into the United States was William T. Harris of St. Louis. He brought the German system in and set the purpose of the schools to alienate children from parental influence and that of religion. Now they got the whole system in that your child can report on you if you want to put a whack on his backside. And nobody is rising up to revolt. The government just slowly takes away from you constantly, a little bit at a time, until you don't even know that you already built in a 6x6. He preached this openly. And he began creating school staffing programs that were immediately picked up by the new teacher colleges, many of which were underwritten by the Rockefeller family, the Carnegies, the Whitneys, and the Peabody family. The University of Chicago was underwritten by the Rockefellers. The bottom line is that we had a literate country in the United States before, well, they had it. before the importation of the German education system designed to dumb down the mass population. It was more literate than it is today. The textbooks of that time make such allusion to history, philosophy, mathematics, science, and politics that they are hard to follow today because the very people are not taught how to think, they are taught what to think. Now understand how diabolical this is, because the books that have the research material that we need so that we could put the missing ingredient of ourselves back into what was taken out, our children today can't read that stuff because the way the words are formed together to set 3 and 4 dimensions into your mind so that you can see yourself. The way these words are structured, you have to be educated in that other system to understand how they even hid the information. And very few brothers who are decoders, very few sisters who are interpreters have the ability to translate that information to our brothers and sisters. So if I am a decoder, it is my business to make sure that the young that I'm teaching, the young brothers and sisters who are now following in our paths, understand how they hid the information by understanding how to decode the system that was in place at the time they were hiding the information. That's why it's so easy to make anyone believe that if I stood up here long enough and started speaking from what I understood and what you, when you read, couldn't understand, it would make it look like I'm the one that's giving up all the spiritual context. It originated with me. It ain't originated with me. We have to start educating, or at least teaching, our children how to become decoders. Not just give them information to make them feel good. Not just make them think that they are gods. How did you become a god? You can walk around talking like you God, and by what you are even saying, you are causing destruction, madness. You are propagating your ignorance because you don't have the depth of study and research. And that's why I say to all my brothers and sisters who have influence over people, it is necessary to teach the people so that they understand how to teach themselves. Why do I say that? Because you see, every decoder or interpreter is actually interpreting for his or her time. And the genetic structure of the time is based upon the environment that he or she operates in. Now understand me carefully, follow me carefully. The environment wherein we operate now, all of us are operating under a genetic code that is similar, or we wouldn't be here. So that genetic code now is based upon how the environment shapes the genetics. And I'm not just talking about the physical environment, I'm talking about the internal dynamic as well as the environment of consciousness that is set by the one who is teaching. Okay? They always tell you, well, the problem is in the genes. Oh man, it's the genes, it's the genes. That's a lie. It's not the genes. It's what shapes the genes. Because scientists are only now finding out that the genes actually operate based upon how the environment dictates to the genes so that the genes change to meet the environment. You see what I'm saying? The genes can be malleable. They can be formed. So they say, well, what's evolution? Well, evolution comes beyond or from whatever God context is set up in the consciousness in light. The light now influences the genes to change in order for that body to evolve. But the genes don't change in and of themselves. That's divine mind. So what do? You set up a precedent where you don't teach nothing but you set up a ceiling of ignorance. So now the genes, which are automatically trying to evolve by themselves, are shutting down. All kinds of diseases are coming about. And you're wondering why people are going crazy. Their minds are flipping. It's because the genes want to break free. They wanted to shape the whole new body that's going to bring in the whole new information. But the ceiling is there. The ceiling is there. The other part of that is other decoders, which is the one that I think are the most progressive decoders that we have amongst us today, are the brothers of the Moorish nation. They are masters at decoding, because the beast has used all of his influence to hide his deviltry. And the brothers and sisters in the Moorish nation are about decoding that nonsense and using it as weapons against him, or at least as defense principles, so that we could fight a guerrilla warfare. But as it stands today, most of the brothers and sisters, not really most of them, but a few of the brothers and sisters who have the genius to decode, are not letting those brothers and sisters that they teach have the opportunity to go and decipher for themselves, to go and study inside of the words that they had studied. I have no such problem. I don't want you following me around asking me for do for you. You're going to do for yourself. And that's what I feel the great work is. Let me go one more further. The bottom line now was that part of this whole paradigm seems to originate from the idea presented in a book called The New Atlantis. You're putting this down. The New Atlantis by Francis Bacon. This is in 1626, 1627. The work described a world research university that scans the planet for babies and talent. Check it. The state then becomes invincible because it owns the university and owns all of the talent. That's what talent is. If you look in the Roman things, a talent was money. So when they say you got talent, it means that you are a money-making entity. That what you do makes money. It becomes impossible to revolt against the state because the state now knows and owns everything. A reflection of this principle can be seen today with the suppression of radical and practical technologies in order to preserve state control of life and prevent evolution and independence. The New Atlantis was widely read by German mystics of the 19th century. By 1840 in Prussia, there were a whole lot of world research universities in concept all over the country, all of them drawing in talent and developing it for purposes of state power and stability. So all of your intellectual elite are given all kinds of monies and grants to maintain the system that's in place, the system of ignorance. Now, because your child represents, and the genes in your child represent the bursting forth of the new potential that you have left, in order to definitely make sure that your child is brought into the construct, they set up something known as experimental psychology. In the middle of the 19th century, Germany had developed a new concept in the sciences, which they termed psychophysics, which argued that people were in fact complex machines. It was the ultimate materialist extension of science that would parallel the mechanistic view of the universe already underway. This new view of people made more or less institutionalized in Germany, and by the 1870s, the field of experimental psychology was born. The ultimate purpose of experimental psychology was to discover the nature of the human machine, and how to program it. The main proponent of this new experimental psychology in Germany was Wilhelm Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, who is today widely regarded as the father of experimental psychology. He is described by orthodoxy as having freed the study of the mind from metaphysics and rational philosophy. Freed the mind from metaphysics and rational philosophy. So there must be an irrational philosophy, brothers and sisters. Hello? If he's freeing you from one, he's obviously putting you into the other. Wundt obtained his PhD in medicine from the University of Heidelberg in 1856 and embarked on a study of sensory perception. His most famous work was Contributions to the Theory of Sense Perception. Get that work? Contributions to the Theory of Sense Perception, done in 1858. It is described by the orthodoxy as the first work of experimental psychology. In 1875, Wundt, W-U-N-D-T, was appointed to the chair in philosophy at Leipzig, where he instituted a laboratory for the systematic experimental study of experience. Check this out. He instituted a program for the systematic study of experience. That's deep. The study of experience. Back then, the phrase "get a life" was not in vogue, and evidently he didn't have much interpretable experience of his own. In 1873, he began a year-long writing project which resulted in, get this book, Principles of Physiological Psychology. I'm sorry. Principles of Physiological Psychology, which became a classic that was subsequently reprinted through 6 editions over the next 40 years, establishing psychology's claim to be an independent science. Wundt also wrote a philosophical subjects such as logic and ethics, but as he did not describe to rational philosophy, his writings presumably yielded irrational interpretations in both areas. It is conceivable that his warped view of humanity and the universe contributed in some small way to the eventual Nazi penchant for experimenting on those they didn't like. The educational system expands. The wave of immigration, which began in 1848, combined with the visibility of revolutions taking place all over Europe, helped foster uncertainty in the public mind. Laws requiring compulsory schooling were then legislated. It was all very Hegelian. We wouldn't want the little tykes to become reactionaries, would we? He's being sarcastic. The implementation of the German educational nightmare in the United States met with some initial resistance. Now check this out. In Carnegie's hometown of Gary, Indiana, the system was implemented between 1910 and 1916. Now this is very important. Mostly through the efforts of William Wirt, the school superintendent. It involved no academic endeavor whatsoever. It worked so well in supplying willing workers for the steel mills that it was decided by Carnegie to bring the system to New York City. In 1917, they initiated a program in New York in 12 schools with the objective of enlarging the program to encompass 100 schools and eventually all the schools of New York. William Wirt is the one who supervised that particular transaction. Unfortunately for Carnegie, and listen well, unfortunately for Carnegie, the population of the 12 schools were predominantly Jews who innately recognized what was being done and the nature of the new education system. There's no innately recognized. They knew the system. And the elite from their own came to New York. You understand? Check it. 3 weeks of rioting followed. Now you understand how change happens? 3 weeks of rioting followed, and the editorials of the New York Times were very critical of the plan. Over 200 Jewish school children were thrown in jail. The whole political structure of New York that had tried this scheme were then thrown out of office during the next election. A book describing this scenario, carefully, listen, The Great School Wars by Diane Ravitch. Listen, get these books. By Diane Ravitch. Curiously, William Wirt, check it out, William Wirt was committed to an insane asylum about 1930 after going around making public speeches about his part in the large conspiracy to bring about a controlled state of mind on certain people. He was killed 2 years later. In order to make sure that the independence of the one-room schoolhouse and the pension for communities to hire their own independent teachers would cease. My brothers and sisters, I came from a space where it was a little one-room schoolhouse. And my mother, my father, my grandmother, my aunts, all of them knew the teacher because my aunt was the teacher. And they taught you what they wanted you to learn, not what you had to learn in order to pass and get into the next phase. You get a book called The Unseen Hand. And in that book, it tells you how the education system was systematically taken from mom and pop and put into the hands of the state. No one knew that the communist revolutions were funded from the United States. The buildup of the Soviet Union as well as Nazi Germany would also be funded later from the United States in order to get a reactionary public to bend to the will of the controlling political factions. It was a plan that worked so well in the 1920s and worked so well again in the 1950s in the psychological creation of the Cold War, providing funding for the buildup of military, industrial, and the pharmaceutical complex. The non-thinking American public never suspected a thing. Because the United States was owned by wealthy businessmen, a synthetic free enterprise system was created. A synthetic free enterprise system. They tell you it's free enterprise, but it ain't. A synthetic free enterprise system was created, and antitrust laws were passed to prevent anyone else from gaining power. So if you had a great idea, the state would own it. Because if you, that's why they're going after Bill Gates now. Check it. The white boy stumbled on something, and he's cornered the market on communication, which is what they need for the next controlling ceiling of the new paradigm. You see what I'm saying? Earlier in the century, there were no school boards in every town. Between 1932 and 1960, the number of school boards dropped from 140,000 to 30,000. Today there are about 15,000, all controlled by extensions of the Carnegie-Rockefeller education complex. In 1959, with the advent of the Sputnik and the public realization that another country was ahead of us, the embarrassed educational system was forced to temporarily create a synthetic focus on science, which produced a generation, one generation, of scientists and technicians in order to resolve the apparent deficit of the public mind. That is why they are pushing you and your children to start adopting the technology of computers. You see, computers don't need to be thinking 3 and 4 dimensions. They'll have the computer learn how to think 3 and 4 dimensions. You just push a button. So now you understand why I did a preface at the beginning of this, that none of this information belongs to me. The interpretation belongs to me. The facts that I use as my base so that I may grow a flower of realization in you, so that you may use that as your base to follow back where I got mine from to get your own flower growing. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm about. Now, I had said that I'm going to start off with the habits of death. Now, what is the habits of death? Habits of death is exactly what it is that we pursue every day. We don't realize that we are in a syndrome of death. The very thought process that we use, the very actions that we unconsciously partake in are the habits of death. Let us go outside right now and look at the way they look the types of foods they put into our communities. And they have created a habit of death. There are non-foods. There's no foods in our community that you could walk out into. Everything is in a box. Were you born in a box, brothers and sisters? No. So your food should never come from a box. It should come from what nature herself gives to you. Now, the reason why we are so susceptible to disease is because we don't even walk on the dirt anymore. Do you realize that the biology of the human structure and the biology of the planet are synergistically linked in such a way that the mother continuously feeds us? But now we have blocked her. We have systematically isolated ourselves from her, and we are taking in artificial forms of agitation. This is an artificial form of agitation. This is not real light. So what does the body have to do? It has to genetically structure itself to this pathological environment that we are working in. What does that do? It then systematically limits our ability to organically interface with the properties necessary for us to establish our next paradigm. That is, Nature Mother herself. We need to go into the forest, we need to go into the nature of things and let that instrument, let that technology talk to us directly. We have lost that link. And what do we link into now? We go into the computers. And we look into computers. Do you know what them computers are doing to you, brothers and sisters? They're making you crazy. First of all, your eye, if you work at a terminal, do you realize that your eye goes through 30,000 adjustments just in that day? That's unnatural. Why? Because the pixels on the computer are in such a way that the edges of the words are faded, and the light comes from the middle of the letter or the word, and you have to adjust the eye around the faded edges instead of it being stark. Like I could look at these words here, and they have a clear outline that I could read. Even though it's one-dimensional or two-dimensional, I can still focus one way. But with the pixelation, and you constantly using words that you have to switch screens, your eyes are constantly trying to adjust because the words are not stark. They don't have edges for you to immediately focus in on. So if they're almost invisible, your eyes are trying to focus on the faded part to get a definition for the part that isn't faded so that you can make out the word. By the time that happens, you have used up so much vitamin A in your body that your eyesight is going. And this is even more important for my sisters, because once you start using up the vitamin A in your body, your estrogen goes completely out of your body. Estrogen is dependent largely on vitamin A, as well as the lecithin and the boron. Boron maintains the estrogen integrity. But if you are using your eyes, my sisters, to do any enormous amounts of reading, or you're using into computers to deal with two-dimensional letters. See, the eyes, brothers and sisters, were meant to process three-dimensionality. God didn't write no word for you to read instructions. Your instructions are already encoded on your DNA. Everything that you are studying outside is already imprinted inside. Most of the education that you're doing and most of the research you're doing is just reference points to what you already know. But if you are constantly using your eyes, sisters, because in the past you didn't read, you already knew, you felt. And most of the education that our sisters did, or I don't even use that word education, we got to find another word. Most of the learning that our sisters did was based on the griot principle. Because the eyes for reading and what you sacrificed as a result caused a deficit to the femininity that you had. This is why a lot of our sisters, with the lack of proper distribution of vitamin A, are ending up with the fibroid tumors, are ending up with the breast cancers. Why is it that in the last 30 years of the feminist inquisition, that female diseases have jumped 150%? My sisters, you cannot adopt to this particular system, because this system was inspired, thought of, and orchestrated, structured, and designed around a male purview. This whole design was masculine. So automatically, by psychic affinity, they would structure something to suit them. You now have not come to refocus and change it so that it's more adaptability to your physiology. You are just adapting his. So now if you have to do what he does, your body has to mutate. You have to create a hell of a lot more testosterone. When you create testosterone, what happens? You imbalance your estrogen. And of all my sisters and who have come to see me, and 85% of the people who come to see me are sisters, all of them have fibroid tumors, and all of them have some indication of testosterone overload. And this is the sadness, because I see it. The hair starts growing in places that they're not supposed to be growing. Specific problems that could only happen because of testosterone toxicity. It's called hyperandrocity. in the technical terms. This is what's happening today. Now, when you destroy the feminine principle by having her have to survive by adopting masculine principles, what do you do to the next generation? Notice our young sisters who have their hips, they don't have the hips anymore. Straight. Notice our brothers having more breasts. This is not something that you should be ashamed of. What it is that we have been operating in ignorance for so long. We have had to adopt to a paradigm that was meant for our destruction, that was meant to keep us below the ceiling of our potential. And they have set our potential levels by setting the level of our knowledge and the level of the information that should be disseminated amongst us. Now, I'm going to be speaking about the habits of health, which is essentially what our sisters are doing and even what our brothers are doing too. We are eating incorrectly and above all thinking incorrectly. We have no clue as to who we are, so we don't have the understanding of that so that we may change the genetic structure of our present knowledge base, because knowledge base comes from a change in genetic structure. The genetic structure changes based upon experience. If I am reading and I don't know what I'm reading, I can't experience what is being conveyed to me. You can give experience vicariously. That's why reading and understanding knowledge is so important. Even if you're not reading, if you are studying based upon a teacher who is there to make sure that you are becoming greater than he. If I can't teach my younger brothers and sisters to surpass me, then I am contributing to the paradigm that keeps us locked down. My younger brothers over there should be greater than I by the time he reaches, should be surpassing me and then taking this as the base of my information and then zooming to the next time zone with it. But if you have people that's teaching you to be for them, or you are propping yourself up as the conveyor or the purveyor of the information, then that sets a precedent of confusion. Because now you are the only one they look to. And that's dangerous. Because then anyone else who has information that may corroborate, if that one person or those persons don't say the same thing, then they're not believed. The people caught up in that paradigm won't look outside of that paradigm. No more ceilings. No more ceilings. So what I want to do to interface with you now is to get into your needs. I make sure that you come to see me. I want to answer your questions so that when you leave, you can follow through. If there is something that you wish to talk about based on health, I'm here. Now, you know there's certain questions you want to ask about yourself, and yeah, I'm a little embarrassed, and I want to talk about it. I may want to just whisper in your ear, even though we're alone. But we can talk about this. Anything beyond this point, you know you pay for. So ask me good questions. Yes, beloved.
What's the deal with neuropathy? I just came across that information and I'm starting to get into it.
Beautiful.
I need to assimilate some information so master will know.
Definitely. Neuropathy is a science that goes back to the beginning, when the idea of disease first came in. Disease is an idea. Disease essentially is something that you yourself believe can happen. Disease starts in a thought and then filters down as a reality. We create our conditions. Neuropathy is the usage of urine in your therapy. Now, all of us who are old enough know our grandmothers and great-grandmothers have been using this urine for countless centuries, and again, they done took our science and they get ready to run with it and make it into this big hoopla. But the science of uropathy has been around a long time. I'm going to give you a specific tincture that you could use. Now, in the morning times is the best time to catch the urine, especially if you have a problem. If you have a problem with a cold, if you're having a problem with headaches, if you are having like skin rashes, nausea, if you have what is called an infection, if you have what they call syphilis or venereal diseases, if you got AIDS, if you got cancer, you can use uropathy. Why? Because uropathy is the usage of the materials that your body's own intelligence created to heal itself. Let me repeat that. Uropathy is using the materials that divine intelligence created to heal and sustain itself. The vaccination idea came from that. But what they do is use the filthy byproducts of cows and horses and God knows what else. So your urine is biologically safe for usage. Matter of fact, if you were in the military and you were in Air Force pilot training school, fighter school, if you crashed in enemy territory, the first thing they said and the first thing they got in the pilot's thing is a way for the pilot to collect his own urine. The urine has properties, enzymes, and so-called white blood cells. It has albumin and different proponents of the blood that the blood will recognize immediately as a tonic because the blood created that particular essence to heal itself. So by the principle, homeopathic principle of using one poison to get rid of another poison, you use the poison that the body created as its own byproduct back into itself. The body recognizes it as a healing potion and boom, you start healing up. You wonder where the canker sores went?
It wonders for your skin.
Oh, yes it does. You put it on your skin, it does wonders for your skin. Yes, you do. So uropathy is very important, especially since we are going into the next paradigm where it's going to be rough for the next, say, 20 years. You ain't going to be able to get a hospital bed for under $5,000. So your hospital bed better be your bed where you laying down. And you have certain things in there. As a matter of fact, I'm ready to get ready to drop some places and resources where you can start picking up things for you to store. Water, dry goods, and so forth. I'm going to give you that in a little while. But collect your urine, the middle portion of your urine, the first urine of the morning. You could drink that straight down. The only thing that's wrong with that is the idea. Oh my God, no, I can't believe I'm doing this. And ain't nobody in the room with you. You start looking and saying, wait a minute, I got to rethink this. You know, I know Brother Valentine, you know, he got good intentions, but damn. But what you got to do is to understand that the reality is that that is a homeopathic tincture. Now, what you can do is you can attenuate it and even accelerate its potency by taking maybe a small bottle, a decanter, a small decanter. Make sure it's brown or dark or blue, something to filter out the waves, the light waves. And you take about 2 or 3 tablespoons to fill it up, depending on how large it is. Then with the eyedropper, you take about 4 to 5 drops of the middle portion of your urine and put it into that bottle along with that purified, sterilized, or distilled water. Make sure it's boiled. But you can't use tap water, you can't use them other waters. Try to get it as refined as possible. Then you take about 4 or 5 drops of the of gin or vodka, the purest you can. Drop about 4 or 5 in there. I'm giving you a tincture for you to get rid of all that stuff that you might have, canker, if you got a herpes, all of that. You take that, drop it in, and then close it down and shake it for about 20 minutes. You get tired in one hand, do it in the other. Just keep doing it. What you're doing is you're potentizing it. If you want, you could put it under a pyramid as well. If you want, you could put a crystal inside of it. Then what you do is every day you took about 3 or 4 drops under the tongue every hour, and in a day or 2, I guarantee, whatever that ailment is, you will see a marked reverse on it. And this goes for open sores that come from, say, herpes. Now, let me give you an idea of what disease is, so you don't, and whenever, like, sisters get the discharges, or brothers say, well, you know, on the other side, on the side here, right there by the groin, there's a swelling there. Doc, what is that? And all of a sudden there's this sore that's on the side, and it's like, oh my God, I'm dying, and syphilis, and can't even put my drawers on. I gotta walk funny and sit funny. Well, what's happening is that the body uses the weakest part to get rid of its waste. Now, if you're doing the wild thing constantly, you are creating what is known as a thermal, you are losing the thermal integrity of the area. See, this area keeps a certain temperature constant. And that temperature constant maintains the bacterial proliferation. There are certain bacteria that already exist in this area, such as the spirochete, which scientists in Western medicine say creates or causes syphilis. That's a lie. No bacteria causes any disease. Bacteria are very frail, but they are malleable. They are malleable in that they can change in accordance with the environmental conditions set for them. And that's the beauty and the intelligence of the body. If you are causing a thermal breakdown in this area, it means that this area cannot sustain the proper balance of bacteria, which means that the area cannot get rid of the waste that collects in this area. Your body is constantly filtering waste in this area because this is an outlet for the lymphatic system. Now, if there is a thermal breakdown, it means that the lymphatic system cannot take waste past this area efficiently enough. So when the waste collects, the little bacteria gets signals from the hypothalamus and from the pituitary, and it says, oh man, I got to get to work and get rid of all this filth. My boy be eating all this chicken and fried this and all this crap and all this sugar and this garbage. And right now, he's so weak because he's doing the wild thing all the time, then going out and eating Mickey D burgers, and he's drinking this and he's doing all these things. Now what you have to do is says, okay, what you got to do, all right, send down signals to these little bacteria to start eating. So the little bacteria starts to eat up all the waste and filth. That's what they subsist upon. Bacteria only eats on the dead material that's there. They don't eat on live material. You understand what I'm saying? So what happens is if the material far out or exceeds the bacterial presence, what does the bacteria have to do? Multiply. So now in comes the vaunted medical scientist, and he takes a pap and he draws your blood, and oh, you got this. Oh, you got problems. He's looking for certain, protocol criterias. What he's essentially looking at is the end result of a process. He's not looking at the cause of the process. Medical science looks at a pile of garbage, sees flies around it, and believes that the flies brought the garbage. You get the scenario? So he in there, he looking at all these germs, and he looking at all this crap, and he's saying, well, wow, look at all these germs, man. You got all these problems. These germs are causing your problems. No, they're not. They're there trying to fight the problem that you instigated in your ignorance. So now the more you eat, the more you act stupid, the more germs, so-called, quote, have to multiply in order to deal with your stupidity. Now what happens is, because the integrity is broken down, the body has to get rid of this waste as efficiently as possible, because the conduits that normally get rid of that waste, which is your intestinal system, your alimentary tract, is blocked. You're constipated. Now the body has to use other ways to get rid of it. What does it do? It opens up the sore at the surface of the what do you call it? And it starts getting rid of all that garbage. And you say, oh my God, look at that. I'm dying. The doc gives you something, he shoots you up with antibiotics or some other garbage that comes out of his ballistic arsenal. And what he does is repress your body's own intelligent reaction to your stupidity. Check? Am I going too fast? Please stop me. Say, wait, that don't sound right. And I'm praying that this is related. I want this tape because I'm gonna chock this tape full so that my brothers and sisters at least can take it home and just get to schooling. Get the young ones in front of it. Let them start taking notes and going back to their teacher. Start agitating. Start arguing with the teacher. They kicked me out of class a bunch of times because sometimes something inside of me just said, that just don't sound right. And that's what I want them to be, warriors in class. Well, wait a minute, teacher. I was told that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, how do you verify it? I got the books on that. In the books of so-and-so and so-and-so and so, it says this so-and-so. Could you imagine what the teacher would be doing? Backing up and having to do her own research. So the child shall be the teacher to the man. Brother had his hand up first. Well, yeah, they also the tunnel syndrome with the tunnel syndrome being used by using one particular facet of the body too much. I know some brothers and sisters who got carpal tunnel from this area, you know. The eyes can be covered by some computer glasses that have a filter. You can also use ultraviolet light. That's one way. You can also use a 7-spectrum, a full spectrum arc lamp that has all 7 of the colors within the white light dynamic. This, for instance, only vibrates within the blue light dynamic, which is why a lot of people end up having sore throats and having sick building syndrome, they call it. Because the whole environment here is artificial. And it causes your whole body structure, from the enzymes to the genes to the DNA, to have to restructure and to cause it to defend itself. So instead of the DNA having to do what it needs to do to keep you as a conscious God, it has to keep reverting and re-vibrating or recalibrating its vibration to defend itself against the environment that you've created. That's why you keep breaking down so constantly. Your DNA cannot vibrate on the proper frequencies to bring in the higher consciousness light codes that you need to break free. So what you do is you take your juices, raw juices, you eat your raw foods instead of that Subway that you bring in from lunch and that pizza. You start having fruits. You make sure you put the arc lamp right there next to the terminal. They have filters. Stop. Get away from it. Close your eyes so that it doesn't do any more focusing. Okay? These are some of the ways. Don't use a computer. I know. It said, well, damn, I got to work. See, we are constantly perverting ourselves to adapt. I can't tell you. I can only tell you what it is to do, that you have to do to not have or become or succumb to what's wrong. You don't do it. I know it's something, oh man, I need a computer. The society is making me have to do this. I can only tell you ways to defend yourself against it, but the ultimate way is don't use it. Leave it away. Or back off of it every like 15 minutes and rest yourself for 15 minutes, then come back for 15 minutes. I know. Brother. Mm-hmm. Yogurt? That what? I didn't hear the first word. Cancer. Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, it has a bacteria. Okay, first question was on the yogurt. The yogurt, as dog folks, we don't need intrinsic factor. That's what it's called. Your body has the ability to absorb foods such as chlorophyll directly from the green vegetables. The Caucasoid can't. His bilirubin content, or what is actually a proportion of waste matter, bilirubin is what makes your feces brown. It also is part of the iron content and a derivative that creates the melanin in your skin. You have a better affinity for distributing the bilirubin than the Caucasoid. The Caucasoid, his ability to digest is so deflated and depressed that he has to keep cycling his bilirubin through his body constantly. Now that bilirubin makes his eyes blue. Whenever you see a steel blue Caucasoid, his eyes being steel blue, it means he has a high content of bilirubin moving through his body. The intrinsic factor that can absorb the chlorophyll from vegetables, he doesn't have. That's why he needs the acidophilus. You don't. A lot of our brothers and sisters say, well, I'm taking acidophilus. Well, it's overkill for you. You have the ability if you eat properly. See, white and black, or pale and melanated, melanite, you understand, is a difference. We may have the same instruments, but the circuitry is wired differently. We have, for instance, as dark folks, we have a higher level of copper in the hair. That's what explains the helix. The Caucasoid, or actually, let's say the Dravidian Indians, have the long black hair, which means they have a higher content of iron and protein in theirs. Now, I could show you this is real because the incidence of heart attacks in our brothers and sisters shows upon autopsy that in the heart of the black or the black man or woman there is a high concentration of copper, as if the body was trying to marshal as much copper as it can to save the body. All of our copper is caught up inside of our hair. It is not redistributed properly, so we have that particular tendency. That's why you see us wearing all that copper. Automatically we do it. We don't know why, but we do it. This is medicinal for us. Like sister there, she has certain ornamentations on the table there that I would suggest you see after a while, where sister has certain copper and different types of alloy that she's using, and it's medicinal. That's Sister Puma Lagitania. So we are different. Our intrinsic factors are different, and the ability for us to absorb nutrients are much more different from the Caucasoid, which is why when he came over here on his little boats, that he had to cook his foods as he did so severely, because he needed to have refined foods in order to be able to process through a weak system. Now, how did we become weak? By adopting his habits. Cooking is blasphemous in the eyes of the One Most High and in nature, because your Bible and all of your ancient works say that you ate from the fruit of the trees, and that nature is your cook. She is the divine cook, and that you have everything at your command, and you cannot eat something that is dead and hope to extrapolate life. There is no way for you to eat a vegetarian and hope to get the properties that the vegetarian took in when the vegetarian ate the grass, and hope to break the vegetarian down into a human. When you eat a cow, you eat a vegetarian. But that cow has taken the properties of the grass, and through 3 stomachs, brothers and sisters, have processed that grass into a cow. You don't have the capabilities of taking the protein that that particular grass has been triturated to become, break that protein down, and make a human out of it. That is the biggest fallacy of the meat industry. And that's why you got mad cow now, because it was a mad process to begin with. And you know the One Most High has checks and balances. I can't understand how we folks can see all this thing about mad cow and still be lining up out here for Mickey D burgers and all of this crap. Second question, which has to do with cancer. All diseases begin when the environment of the body has to adapt to pathological conditions. The ability to adapt and overcome is dependent upon how you provide the elements to maintain an environment strong enough to keep pathological conditions from affecting it. But if you are constantly under the gun, constantly fighting off stress, from wondering if you're going to die from walking down the street, wondering if you're going to die from eating Mickey D burgers, wondering if you die from making love, you are constantly being told that your environment is hostile to you. So now you set up a defense mechanism that's subconscious in you, and you're constantly fighting, even though you're standing up there thinking that you're calm. You are slowly but surely breaking yourself down and not realizing that your body is constantly on defense mode. When you have exhausted yourself because the food that you are eating is not proportional to the strength that you're giving off, you begin to become more and more deficient. Cancer is the byproduct of selfish thinking. Now, you know all diseases have a metaphysical beginning in the thought process. Selfishness is one of the primary reasons for cancer. Sex out of season. What the heck does he mean by that? You mean summer, spring, winter, fall? Even the animals know there's a season for it. Oh, I thought we were not animals, we were gods. Oh, you see, that's the second part of this dissertation. How we were gods at one time, and all the histories you talk about, Heru, and that's us. Heru was not a person. Heru was a title, just like bishop, just like mayor, just like president. There were many Herus. Oh, that put a whole new tint on the Kemetic society, don't it? Oh, yeah. How do you know why they don't like me? When you have caused a degradation of the environment wherein the cells must operate, the cells take your programming and they function according to their duties that you have given to them. If those duties are based on confusion, the cells don't know what they're programmed for, and they begin to find their own programming. And because of the fact that you have so much filth in your system, you eat so much meat, you have turned your stomach. What do you do with a dead body? Huh? You bury it. So you must be using your stomach as a grave, because you keep burying dead meat in it. So what else can come from a grave but death? If your body is the repository of life, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, free of death. Death is a habit. Death is a programming that we have agreed to participate in. Because when you take the cell and you isolate it from the body and you put it in a petri dish, it mutates completely to adapt to the environment. But if fed the proper components, it will live forever. So why do we die? Because we have adopted the habits of death. My brother had a hand over here somewhere first. Let me get ready.
You asked about worms in the body.
How worms coming?
How to rid of them.
Oh, how to rid the worms. Oh, okay, yeah. Worms, garlic. Garlic is the number one. Fasting is the number one. When you start purifying your body by not putting the components that keep that worm alive, well, they say, well, they got some tenacious worms. Well, what you need to do is to become more tenacious in your resolve to fast. You can go 40 days without eating. You can go 7 days without drinking. The brother had his hands up. Let me go right back to you. Okay, that's a long kind of process for me to get into. But the best way to know how to fast and to purify is you look at the animals. The animals wasn't taught how to fast, but as soon as the animal becomes sick, it stops eating. You can't feed a dog that's sick. He'll look at you like you're crazy. What would the dog do? Dog go out and eat some grass. Did he get taught how to fast? No. And that's what the animals really represent to humanity. They're our teachers. We forgot that we created them through our residual thought processes as we were condensing into the flesh. Hello. Okay. We'll get back to that. But how we fast and how we purify, there are those of us who teach that and actually make a living with it. And I have been blessed to have had a chance a few years ago to have been married with a sister named Queen Afua, and we built something called Heal Thyself together. And now that has now flourished out, and I have the self-healing. She still has Heal Thyself. But that particular concept still exists. So there are many people that help to teach that particular science, and you can find them. Yes, brother, go right. No, let's give another brothers a little chance. I come right. Yeah. Oh, mad cow. Oh, baby. All right, let me see if the other brother's, the other sister's question comes in line with that.
My question was on Candida.
Okay. All right, Candida. All right, let me just get on the mad cow, and then I'll get right back over to the brother in the back right there. Mad cow. Well, I would say that it is apropos to the times, wouldn't you? The prefix to that is apropos. Things have gone mad. Man has gone mad. Mad cow disease actually starts when you begin to feed flesh to a vegetarian. Now, what does that say? It says that we've been crazy for a long time before they found out about mad cow, right? Because by design, the human machine is a fruitarian. We began adopting these fangs when we began amalgamating with the lower portions of our own selves. I'm an example of it. So when you understand that in your archetypal nature, when the structure of man was being designed, it was designed to incorporate the highest synergistic source of cause and effect, yang and yin, and the only food source we had at the beginning time was the sun. Eating was a byproduct of the fall. We began to get our nutrition secondhand because of the great war that the Nibiru and the Netaru and the Anunnaki and all of them were taking place in outer space. It came here. It was crazy. This whole solar system and other solar systems were at war. So now the container that we call Eden, the dynamic that we call perfection, began to become less perfect. But that was by cosmic design, which is the beauty, because ignorance is actually very good for us. It's a tincture of medicine for the gods in the flesh. It causes us to have to find out. And the more we have to find out, the more we know, the more God knows, because God knows everything. Therefore, he is the exact opposite of himself. He knows nothing. He just is. She just is. So when we understand that perfection is its own end, and perfection means death, we understand that perfection is not what God is, but perfecting. So every time you reach a state of Edenic bliss, the snake enters to make sure that your shit just keeps going. That's why they kicked Adam's ass out of Eden. Imagine being perfect. What are you doing? I'm Adam. I'm perfect. What do you do being perfect? Ain't nothing to do. So Adam left the garden or was kicked out by the angel, and Eve stayed. Ooh, that's a deep metaphysical significance, but we won't go in that now. Why that happened? Because you remember he got a wife in the land of what?
That's right.
That's right. Understand what's going on. There's a science going on there that you don't know about, but you still clapping, hey, praise Jesus. You ain't know nothing about what's going on. You don't have clue the first about your religion that you are being constantly browbeated by. But going back to what you're saying about mad cow. Mad cow is when they take what is known as rendering, which is taking the bodies of all dead animals that they find, putting it into a huge cauldron where they cook it, baste it, and extract all of the components that they can't use from it. They use acids and all types of dissolvents and solvents. And if you were to walk into a plant, a rendering plant, 9 times out of 10, the place where they're doing the rendering is at least shin high in blood. And from what I understand, there are heads floating, cats, parts of animals, dogs, sheep, rats, and roadkill. Because they set up, check this out, they set up little compartments, little receiving stations for where all the hillbillies live. So if there's a roadkill, they can pick it up and pick up a couple of dollars for bringing dead rats and dead muskrats and everything that they can turn into protein. Because then what they do is they take that cauldron and then they freeze dry it, or they dry it up and turn it to powder and put that concentrated protein into the meals of the cows. And they've been finding it in the dog food, they find it in the cat food, and they're finding that crap in your burgers. That's when you chew down and you feel that little hard stuff there. What's that? Bone. So yeah, that's what mad cow comes from. So mad cow, you got to remember the cow that they're using as the cow that you eat is called a piebald cow. And it's a genetic clone of a hermaphroditic cow. The black and white one look like Bessie. That's a piebald cow. That's an unnatural cow because it has that black and white coating. All animals have color, black and brown. Great, they are the rainbow colors. Ain't nothing come out white unless it's deficient. You understand? So that is a manufactured cow that was manufactured in a laboratory. Now they got beefalo and all these things, bison meat they're coming up with. They cross the bison with the cow to get beefalo. This white man is crazy. He is out of his mind. That's why we got mad cow. Cows weren't mad until they met that white man in the laboratory. Oh yeah, now this is the other part they're saying, that the mad cow food is supposed to have created a mutant strain of some form of bacillus that incubates in the brain tissue. And that bad boy is supposed to be awakening sometime within the next 10 years. And people are going to be dropping dead from diseases that they have no way of diagnosing. So what they're going to do is tell you that they drop dead from an aneurysm or some form of heart attack, or they may just explode. We don't know. But what we have known about was that when you saw it, I don't know if you saw when they showed you that picture of that cow that couldn't stand up, and what looked like this thing was coming all out his nose. That's the part of his brain. That was all the materials was they uncloned it so much that the organic plasma, the material that they use to constitute the cow, is falling down. It's falling apart. It's coming out the nose, the ears, out the ass. Organs are melting. It's crazy. Yes, sir.
In your opinion, what are the doctors of death doing to young Malcolm Shabazz,
Well, the first thing you got to remember that that's a good question. I want to speak on something that came to me. IBM 2020 neural chip. Just to sidetrack before we get back on the health. The IBM 2020 neural chip. Yeah. Now, this comes from the Intel connection, a security division of IBM. It says here, limited distribution only, level 9 communication. 2020 neural chip implant. The control of crime will be a paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand for them becomes popular. Our Research and Development Division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Correction to run limited trials of the 2020 neural chip implant. We have established representatives of our interest in both management and institutional level positions within these departments. Federal regulations do not yet permit testing of implants on prisoners, but we have entered into contractual agreements with privatized healthcare professionals and specified correctional personnel to do limited testing of our products. I don't know if you remember, I was the first to introduce a brother onto the scene with this. Brother Brian Wrong. It ain't stopped. He can't get anybody to take that thing out his head. And he told us all about this coming. Oh, Ben, exactly. Yes, it. That's right. We have also had major successes with privately owned sanitariums with implant technology. Sanitariums are normally in hospitals. We need, however, to expand our testing to research how effective the 2020 neural chip implant performs in those identified as the most aggressive in our society. That was the violence initiative that came down when they were targeting our young brothers. Yeah. Oh yeah, back at the time when he had gone and did us a favor. The other part here. In California, several prisoners were identified as members of the security threat group EME, or the Mexican Mafia. They were brought to the health services unit at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed at our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratories. The implant procedure takes 60 to 90 minutes, depending upon the experience of the technician. We are working on a device which will reduce that time by as much as 60% to only 30 minutes. That's why Sister was saying about you putting a child in there. The results of implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. Implants served as surveillance devices to monitor threat group activity. See, black folks can become a threat group very easily. Our young brothers were. That's why they're getting ready to put all these surveillance cameras up in your community. Implants disabled 2 subjects during an assault on correctional staff. Universal side effects in all 8 subjects revealed that when the implant was set to 116 megahertz, all subjects became lethargic and slept on an average of 18 to 22 hours a day. All subjects refused recreation periods for 14 days during the 166 megahertz test evaluation. 7 out of 8 subjects did not exercise, in the cell or out of the cell. And 5 out of 8 of the subjects refused showers up to 3 days at a time. Want to know who them homeless are now? Each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period, and the findings are conclusive that 7 out of 8 subjects exhibited no aggression, even when provoked. Each subject experienced only minor bleeding from the nose and ears 48 hours after the implant due to initial adjustment. Each subject had no knowledge of the implant for the test period, and each implant was retrieved under the guise of medical treatment. It should be noted that the test period for was less than 2 months. However, during the period, substantial data was gathered by our research and development team, which suggests that the implants exceeded expected results. One of the major concerns of security and the research and development team was that the test subject would discover the chemical imbalance during the initial adjustment period, and the test would have to be scrubbed. However, due to advanced technological development in the sedatives administered, the 48-hour adjustment period can be attributed to prescription medication given to the test results after the implant procedure. One of the concerns raised by research and development was the cause of the bleeding and how to eliminate that problem. Unexplained bleeding might cause the subject to inquire further about his routine visits to the infirmary or the other healthcare facility. Devious. The security windfall from this brief test was enormous. Security officials now know several strategies employed by the EME that facilitate the transmission of illegal drugs and weapons into correctional facilities. One intelligence officer remarked that while they cannot use the information they have in a court of law, they now know who to watch and what outside connections they have. The prison at Soledad is now considering transferring 3 subjects to Vacaville, where we have our ongoing implant research. Our technicians have promised that they can do 3 2020 neural chip implants in less than an hour. Soledad officials hope to collect information from the trio to bring a 14-month investigation into drug trafficking by correction officers to a close. Essentially, the implants make the unsuspecting prisoner a walking walkie-talkie recorder for everyone he comes in contact with. There are only 5 intelligence officers and commissioners of corrections who actually know the full scope of the implant testing. In Massachusetts, the Department of Corrections has already entered into high-level discussions about releasing certain offenders into the community with the 2020 neural chip implant. Our people are not altogether against the idea, however. Attorneys for Intel Connection have advised against implant technology outside strict control settings. Under the present governmental structure, our liability would be enormous. While we have a strong lobby in Congress and in various state legislatures favoring our product, we must proceed with the utmost caution on uncontrolled use of the 2020 neural chip. If the chip were discovered in use, not authorized by law, and the procedure tracked to us, we could not endure for long the resulting publicity and liability payments. Massachusetts officials have developed an intelligence branch from their fugitive task force squad that would do limited test runs under tight controls with pre-release subjects. Correction officials have dubbed these potential test subjects the insurance group. The name derives from the concept of the 2020 implant that it ensures compliance with the law and allows officials to detect misconduct or violation without question. The retired police detective from Charleston, Massachusetts, now with the intelligence unit, has asked us to consider using the 2020 neural chip on hardcore felons suspected of bank and armored car robbery. He stated Charleston would never be the same. We'd finally know what was happening before they knew what was happening. We will continue to explore communities using the 2020 chip, but our company representative will be attached to all law enforcement operations with an extraction crew that can be on site in 2 hours from anywhere at any time. We have an Intel Connection discussion group who is meeting with the Director of Security at Florence, Colorado's Federal Super Maximum Security Unit. The initial discussions with the director have been promising, and we hope to have the Research and Development Unit at this important facility within the next 6 months. Florence, Colorado has replaced Marion, Illinois as the federal prison system's ultra maximum security unit. Legislative and executive branch efforts continue to legalize the implant technology. What might happen? Kind of puts a hush over everything, don't it? So we don't know who might be implanted. Somebody had a hand up over, it was over here. I know, wait, hold up. I was going to ask that brother right there. Hang on. Yes. Okay. And what about urine therapy? Go right back to that. Serious urine therapy would wash that right out. Yes, brother. Okay.
What about that little red dot on the cable box?
Yeah, I ain't got no cable. Because I know that the cable, just like brother, he just introduced me to the way that they're dealing with the cable. I got some more information on, we got any Gulf War veterans here? Because I intend to drop what they did over there. It just came out. Non-consensual brainwave and personality studies by the U.S. government. And it mentions cable. Non-consensual brainwave patterns. Boy, does the devil keep redefining your paradigm or what? So what we have going on is this constant bombardment of subsonic and subtle low-frequency wave instructions that are being beamed on the HBO frequency, because I don't know if you came to one of the gathering of the masters and this real heavy-set white boy named Preston Nichols being there, keep spraying himself that time when we had 102 degrees in the shade. Do you remember he said that he had gone down to visit another dude that came, that white boy that was in the that was in the Philadelphia experiment, and he said that something was going on where he was getting headaches, a guy named Al Bielek. He was getting headaches, and he was getting certain frequency wave modulations that made him dizzy. And he went in there, and Preston brought all of his oscillating equipment down. And he went outside to the phone wires, he went outside to all the different technology that was outside. Then he attached it to the television and the television antenna. And he went through the different waves and the different frequencies and the different bands that they were broadcasting on. He went all the way up to 13. Then he went into the UHF, was that it? And he started going up there. And he said he started fixing the bands as he got higher and higher. Then he went to HBO. And it was on the HBO cable band that something peculiar began to happen. He began to pick up inside of the wave that was being broadcast as the HBO band something that was an anomaly that he couldn't recognize, because he's a technician. So he began to isolate the band, and he was looking at the band, and he said, well, what the heck is that? I have never seen a band like that in any of the artificial electronic waves that are created based on technology. So it kept perplexing him until one day he took it to a friend of his who was a brain specialist. So he took it and he said, you recognize any of these patterns? And his boy said, wait a minute, those are brainwave patterns. So what he saw then after he found that was that he took it, isolated it, and then took the band and went a notch up again and found out that inside of that band there was this pulse going through that one band. The band that you couldn't find on the HBO, as you were looking at it, had another pulse signal going through it. And when they isolated that pulse signal, they found that it had to do with quantum bits of information that was passing through the analog brainwave pattern. So what they were actually doing was inculcating a brainwave pattern to set up a synergy with the mass brainwave pattern. Once they set a synergy and locked the mass brainwave pattern, they then pulse through information and instructions on it. See what I'm saying to you now? Here's the deal. The television does not have to be on for them to do this mischief. And here's how they do it. Now, you may even have to go and restructure something else with that. Now, here's something. I'm going to drop this on you. Check this. Anybody saw the one, that last movie Mel Gibson did? Conspiracy Theory. Do you remember he mentioned somebody in the government that he was working with? What? MK Ultra. CIA, MK Ultra, MK Delta. Mind control. Oh, you didn't see it? Oh, y'all obviously didn't look at it. Y'all must have been there looking at Mel Gibson. But check it. They thought he was crazy. Now check this. MK Ultra and MK Delta was set up by the CIA to incorporate mind control technology into the mass population. And how did they do that? Through simple mechanisms that you use in your house every day. They found that most of the time you look at TV, where are you? Where? Shout it out. In bed. Now follow me closely. They found that there is a specific circuitry that they could set up so that they can use as a board, a sounding board. And that sounding board was a matrix that looks exactly like your box spring mattress. When you lay down, the springs go into a specific tension that creates the proper capacitance for you to pick up brain waves. And your ability to pick up those brainwave patterns is based upon your weight, because if you're heavy, you pick up a higher tension. So you usually get the heavy box spring. So they already set you up and adjusted the technology to this simple circuit. Now, who can remember when there was this explosion, a veritable explosion of cheap bed mattresses being sold? We'll deliver it to your door. We'll run alongside your car for you. We'll have it there in a half hour. We'll even take yours out for you. Now you understand? Because they found out that the antenna you have on your roof, connected directly to the TV, could set up the proper signal to incorporate or entrain you. Entrainment means that I could set up a wave at you, and then inside of that wave, like music, inside of the music, I could put up an entrained message that your subconscious would pick up, and then begin to program your conscious from your subconscious. So the entrainment pattern they found was very easy if a specific circuit was set up. That specific circuit is set up by your body, its aura, and the springs that you lay on. And connected to the television, the wire, and that cord that goes outside, they can easily get you. And what they did was do a random field disbursement. Excuse me. A random field disbursement from satellite. And they set up these satellites where they can bounce the information off of those very same satellite dishes that you found on Montauk Avenue, over there by Starlight City. They can bounce that information off satellites and hit everybody. Wait now, we're going to get to that. We have to first warn the folks who are eating that pork and that hog maw and chitlin. Yes, brother. VCR, well, the VCR essentially would have the tape programming. Now, they have used the tape in order to put the messages down, just like in the music that they put out. Puff Daddy is the biggest purveyor of programming. People don't even know that. Why do you think my boy is being elevated and being given all these props? Yeah. Do you understand who Puff Daddy is now? Sold out. Big money. All he does is say, yeah, I got the green. Who the hell got that kind of money anyway? He's playing that bullshit up to the children so that they take their mind off of what's real. Yeah. That whole shit. Now, he gonna go ahead. I heard that they took it to the Garden, and I ain't against rap. I'm for good rap, like the brothers in Wu-Tang Clan. They like to try to put out some sciences. They don't mean they take away their raw edge, but they put science out there for you. KRS. They're at least trying to put the message out. But when these, Rakim, but when these niggas who's putting on all this gold and what do you call it and talking all this pimp daddy bullshit, you got to watch that because that's affecting your children, make them believe that that's the way the world is. And it ain't that's the way the world is. Now they take him to the garden and they got all kind of pyrotechnics and shit blowing up all over the place. They said he ain't do a damn thing but say, yeah, come on, Brooklyn in the house. What the hell are we talking about? The education, the entertainment levels have crashed, have gone through the basement now. Because I remember when you were up there and you were playing, you entertained, but then when Earth, Wind, and Fire started dropping science on you, baby, you couldn't help but rock because it was a smorgasbord for you. You heard the horns and the drums and you saw people actually create the music. Not sample it with some motherfucker up there talking their shit here. Sugar, 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 yeah, yeah. Our children have become creatively infantile now. There used to be a music store in all of our communities. They all gone now because we don't promote taking up an axe so that our children would have a meditational outlet to their stress. A way for them to use this instrument as a spirit catcher. Because that's what an instrument is. It's a spirit catcher for you to find yourself through tones, harmonics. And you soothe yourself. You lose yourself. Yeah, but it's the beat that hits you from the heart. And you got to remember that when you start entraining the heartbeat, if you ain't putting nothing in the mind, when the mind is open, remember now that beat on the heartbeat is do. And it's that's your heartbeat. And the ancients used to heal you that way. When you got sick, they'd be out there with the drum. They were setting up an affinity to your heartbeat so that you would stay on the earth. So what do they do now? They use the heartbeat signal to entrain you into dancing because the heart is controlling this part. But then they start feeding you with the bullshit so that you now are listening to nothing except programs. Get your gat. They knew exactly how to destroy the next generation. You take the music from a people and you have taken away their ability to teach their own. But thankfully some of the young brothers broke free, and even though they weren't given the talent or the ability to play instruments, they still had the ability of the word. And a few of them broke through to start teaching their young brothers and sisters what it is that they were doing wrong in their own way. But the few that does get pushed by this beast is the one that's making all the money. Puff Daddy is a talented dancer. He's like one of the baddest tap dancers out there. Nobody heard about that, did they? They did a video with him and Servan in Savion Glover. Puff is bad. Can he rap? No. Can he produce? Yes. But Puff Daddy surrounds himself with talent, because if it was just up to Puff Daddy, he wouldn't have made it. Serious rappers, like the ones who come from Wu-Tang, the ones who have the staccato and the iambic pentameter and the attack on the words to emphasize words. Those brothers who speak that science, you don't see them out there except when they come out with music that agitates. Yes, sister. Oh, a lot of the music, you say? How about all the music? And the only true rapper that actually evolved out of all the other rappers, essentially, who just keeps it on a minimum level himself is, and I like him too, brother with the locks, Busta Rhymes. I liked his attacks, because he was definitely a student of the last poets. And I know who the kids would say, well, who's the last poets? See, if we understood and we controlled our own music, the kids would know who the last poets were. That's where it all came from. Okay, I'm off of that. Somebody has something to do with health. The candida, right. Candida is a sugar problem. Girls, y'all like them cakes, you like that ice cream, and you sure enough like that bread. You eat that bread constantly, which changes into an artificial sugar. It takes more energy to get rid of that bread sugar than it does for you to process fruit sugar. When you have to deal with that bread sugar, it means that you have to give up a lot more of your insulin, which overworks your pancreas. Now, if your body can't process that sugar properly, and there's too much sugar in your body connected to a whole lot of other junk that you're eating, you produce a lot of fermentation in the body. So when you have like cheese-like residues in your body, if you ain't gotten rid of that total thing inside of your bloodstream, it keeps coming back constantly because of what you keep eating and the combinations you keep eating. That's why they tell you, don't have fruits if you're coming down off of candida. Don't eat sweet things. Well, that's because sugar ferments. And that particular bacillus that you have in your system eats on that fermentation. So you constantly have this disbursement. But you see, candida can imitate anything. It can imitate cataracts. It can imitate high blood pressure. It can, yes, I'm going to give you the ones that really deal with us. It can imitate back pains. It could imitate, what's that other one? Diabetes symptoms, the lupus symptoms. Ah. Well, you see, the sugar that you're using has become a drug in your body because it's an artificial sugar. Just like cocaine sets up a dependency imperative in the bloodstream by forcing the body to become dependent on it, by destroying enough cells so that the material that the new cells are being created from are mixed in with this drug. So the cells will call for that poison. This is how it adapts. But it adapts by degrees to its own death, in other words. But you have to change the cellular mind, which begins here. It has to be some trigger mechanism from here. Because there are a lot of brothers and sisters who tried cocaine back in my days and they ain't hooked. There is something that they're doing to the cocaine now, and something that they're doing to the outstations that they have for your rehabilitation that keeps you drug addicts. The biggest drug addicts now are our children in school. Because if you were to walk past the stores where they got to go to school, if I was to stop in front of that school and ask every child going in there to empty their pockets into a box, I could open up a concession stand tomorrow. And they are eating and sucking and taking them chips, their face all yellow and their tongue all red and orange and blue. You got to remember, too, that they put food in our communities that you can't find anyplace else. Now, when you get blue juices that's supposed to be blueberry, we know that you could make anything blue by putting different chemicals together. And you wonder why it is that our children are breaking down, having these problems of attention in class. It's serious. So yes, to get rid of the cravings, I always say for you to get rid of something bad, best thing to do is to put something good in its place. You can't attack it with something bad, like asking a person to give you another drug to suppress it. The suppression should not be suppression, because when you use the word suppression, the first thing you're doing is using force, which will always create a counterforce to push back. So you don't want to suppress a symptom. They got this thing on television now where they say genital herpes. The idea is suppression. The hell you want to suppress a cleansing reaction? But I'm saying you want to suppress a reaction of the intelligence? It's about suppression. So they say it's so quiet. It's about suppression. So you're saying, oh. And you don't know. Most of the people who are talking about AIDS, when they first dropped that nonsense in our community, we had about 1,000 different experts who didn't know their ass from their elbow, saying, that's right, that's how you can catch AIDS. And they have our children talking to our children in all of these AIDS specials. Well, you can catch the AIDS virus. That's how they're teaching us. Yeah, not only teaching you how to catch it, what they're doing is programming you for death, because then the doctor becomes the Lord High pronouncer of your execution. Well, we found HIV. Now we have options. You can take this drug. Yes, and with our absolution, this is our sacrament for that sin. Medical science is a church, and it dispenses its sacrament to you. Now, when the doctor says to you, you have HIV, he has pronounced your sentence. Because remember, the media has already set the precedent for your death by saying, look at all these dead and dying people. This is what can happen to you. It's a killer. We have an AIDS monster. This man that goes around having sex, he knew he had HIV and he's spreading it, and there's a panic in the neighborhood. It's all bullshit. You cannot catch a deficiency, brothers and sisters, because the very word deficiency means you don't have it. The idea about you catching a degenerative disease is so asinine when you understand what a degenerative disease is. Degenerative denotes a enfeebling by degrees. You degenerate by degrees. Degeneration means slowly over a period of time you degenerate. Now name another degenerative disease. No, you don't lose your immune system. Well, see, what happens is we don't have an immune system. That's the first bullshit. You have a defensive system. Because immunity, if my brother Moores know, it means that you can't be touched for anything, no matter what you do. Presidential immunity. Diplomatic immunity. See, when you use the word immunity, it means you can't touch. That's an artificial word. So when they're telling you, come and get that arm up there, they say, just say no, but walk down the hall and fill your prescription. They shoot you up with a drug that tells you they are building your immune system. There's no way that you can improve on perfection. You cannot force the body to practice its defensive mechanism, because the body by design is a conserver of energy, and it does not do anything it does not need to do. So when you give that body poisons, you are not giving it a practice run. You have assaulted it. You have ambushed it. Now, when you deal with defense, you understand, first of all, the body has two mechanisms to prevent any kind of so-called germ buildup or any kind of problems that would come from the outside. The first line of defense for the body is the skin. The second line is the mucous membrane. Those are the first and pretty much the greatest defense mechanisms you have in your whole body. Now, when you go past those two primary defense mechanisms and try to put that filth directly into the blood, then the blood has to do something incredible that it would never have done, because that particular problem wouldn't have reached to the blood. So when you put that filth in the blood, you have forced the body to create antibodies to the filth you put in. Otherwise, antibodies do not exist. There is no such thing as an antibody. That is a medical myth. The antibodies are only incidental to the attack on the bloodstream. The body sacrifices whole blood cells in its defense. It changes the constitution of the cellular network to match the filth and the poisons that were put in. So when they go back in and they take a titer of your blood and they see antibodies, what they're actually seeing is a mutation of your cellular structure to deal with the poison that you have been attacked by. Check? Now, what does that vaccination do? The vaccination, especially when it's done to our children, and here's how diabolical this is. Our children's growth and development in the early stages are very important to their intelligence in later stages. There is a part of the body, the nervous system, called the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is the covering around the nerves that sends the signals, the electromagnetic and electrochemical signals, through the nerves and to the specific areas that the information from the brain is sending it to. When you take vaccinations and you give vaccinations to your children, you cause a destruction of their myelin sheath. When you have no myelin sheath, then there is no signal processing of intelligence. Then you have static electricity running through the child, and that's when you have that disorderly conduct child, that child that cannot learn. Because you have created an environment within the body that destroys the myelin sheath necessary for that child processing information into intelligence. So now your child can't process information because anytime you try that child to learn, he don't have the attention span. And the first thing you must have when you're ready to learn is attention. The second thing, once you have them paying attention, is to teach them concentration. Our children can't concentrate anymore. Why? Because now they're in front of video games. That's their drug. That's their babysitter. That does more to destroy the other factor in their bodies. The same thing with the vitamin A, destroy the myelin sheath in their brain. And that too contributes to their inability to sit still, because remember, when you're dealing with video games, you watch these children, their reaction time is like, damn, how did they do that? And now you take a child that goes and deals with that and sit them down in an environment where you need to have calm, where learning is something that is an evolutionary process. Forget it. Unless you're teaching at the speed of the video game, they ain't paying attention to you. And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying to you, that unless you teach your children concentration, and unless they are getting the proper nutrition, then you have an enemy to your environment, and a person who turns from, a young brother especially, he turns from a provider and a protector to a predator. Yes, sister. Yes. The Ritalin is again a way of taking what would the natural electrochemical potency that melanin causes. When that melanin starts causing that electrical energy, and remember, melanin is an organizing molecule, brothers and sisters. It organizes all of the components to come together so that intelligence may manifest. When you interfere with the pathways that manifest the lines from that melanin molecule to the extensions from that melanin molecule, once you interfere with that, that buildup of electrochemical, electromagnetic, electrostatic energy is going to start short-circuiting the nerves. I don't want to sit still. He can't help it. So what do? You attack his hippocampus.
When you hear things like virus, like chickenpox, shingles, measles, herpes, and all that, when it's in your body, it's there for life?
No, it's not there for life. It's there for life if you keep continuing to do the practices and the habits of death. It's there for life. It's actually there for death. If you look at it, right? Yes, sister.
After a woman have a surgery, what can she do to alleviate hot flashes?
Okay, the hot flashes comes as a result, again, of electrochemical disturbance in the body. Women who have hysterectomies do not have their feminine nature, the grounding part of their feminine nature, intact. When you remove the uterus, you remove the battery of feminine consciousness. Okay? she processes her whole being through her body. Feminine principle is deep. Feminine principle, and this is not an aspersion or any insult, the feminine principle primarily feels, doesn't think. And any thinking she does is through her feelings. The feeling battery, or the feeling mechanism, is her womb. Whenever she feels, especially pain, the first thing she does is roll up in a ball. Why? Because that is the center of her being. So when you speak to a sister, you speak to feelings. You don't try to intellectualize when she's angry. Speak to her feelings. The idea now is that your feelings have been attacked. The instrumentality of your being has been attacked. The way to do it, what do? They tell you, okay, take your estrogen. But then they found out that radical, unprocessed estrogen turns into cancer in the breast. So what you have to do now is to realize that your whole body is an estrogen maker. Not just this component. There are other estrogen receptor sites. Estrogen sites that create, your hair has estrogen. There are parts of your kidneys, there are parts of the nervous system. All of your body has estrogen creators. The idea is to go into meditation and to activate them. So that when you are, say when you are younger, see this is what's so dangerous now, because our sisters are now not developing the backup systems. Why? Because the backup systems are being destroyed by what sisters are doing in the yang world. When you got a sister that could jump up and take basketball, now they want to play football, box, and do all of this, they don't realize that they have absconded from the throne of their femininity. Because most of these games were established by men to do men things. It's a testosterone expression. It's a testosterone thing. It means that when sisters start turning to testosterone games, that they are being influenced from within by their own testosterone toxicity. And anytime, and you see in the last 5 to 6 generations of stress that our women have been under, when you start seeing it come out in the other generation, you got to study this as a pathology. When our sisters come out with no hips, when they have, I'm telling you, when you see our sisters come out with no hips, and I'm a watcher, hey, listen, come on. I'm an avid appreciator of the feminine form. I'd be a fool if I was not. But you have to understand that the feminine form, there is a science to the feminine form. And I have a great proponent of studying and understanding and appreciating. And this is no denigration, this is praise. This is praise. You know, I'm trying to figure out why it is that you could look, yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out why they look at these necrophilic, hungry-looking women, I mean hungry-looking white women, and build them up. Some of these walkway stick figures that they got, what do they call them, high fashion models? Holograms, right? The idea is that the female form was developed scientifically by divine intelligence, and that her form denotes her function. You do not have this accidentally. There is a specific design and intelligence in the functioning, and an intelligent design function in the design itself. If you look at the female form, by design it has the smaller waist, and by design the hips begin to grow. Okay? Supposedly. The reason for the hip structure and the design of the smaller shoulders was to make it easier for her in her intrinsic basic nature to mother the civilization. She, by design, has her center of gravity is below in her hips. That's why she walks to the ground. In the old days, I remember that Sister Betty took her foot up. It was almost like a skate. I can't do it, but you know what I'm talking about, brother. The one that makes you do this. And the one that the sisters know would make you do this. And there's almost like a sway. They can't help it. It's an automatic sway. It's not even a gift. If it is a gift, it's from the One Most High. The reason for that is to create the equilibrium for her eggs. It's a cradle. See, you don't see that. In the higher metaphysics, the walk of the sister is the nurturing of the potential life. And I use this, and my brothers, and they all know me, when I start speaking about you making, when you start dealing with analogies. You go into a supermarket and you're getting ready to go down to the dairy department and you want to buy eggs. Do you, A, go up to the egg department, take your cart, take your eggs, check to see whether they're broken, then put them gently in? Or do you have your cart over there, you go over here, pick up your eggs, throw them in and hope that they land? Do you aim your eggs and hope that they land in the cart? No. Why? Because they will break. So why is it that our sisters are made to believe that they could participate in activities that can damage their eggs or damage the very, very delicate fiber, which is the fascia and the suspensory ligaments that attach those ovaries to the pelvic area? Once they start doing all kind of crazy jumping up and yang exercises, they turn those very delicate suspensory ligaments into what is known as scar tissue. So what happens is the activities, in order to deal with the stress that they've now encumbered, the body chemistry that creates the progesterone that then creates the estrogen, the progesterone mutates to create testosterone. And you will see this because the progesterone molecule and the testosterone molecule look almost alike. So it takes a very thin line of behavior to mutate that progesterone into testosterone. But our sisters don't know that the ancient cultural behavioral habits of women staying away from stress, because that's what men were made for, the women staying away from stress, being isolated, you couldn't get to see the women in the old days until you got past the men. The women walked covered. Islam didn't create that. That was something that Muhammad adopted because he knew that all women who were spiritually developed never walked amongst men unless they protected their olfactory lobes. Why? Because they understood that the very smell of a man can trigger them to ovulate. Ho. Ooh. That's how sensitive you were. The very scent of a man. So when they walked, they never looked because even the eyesight could be triggered. If a woman looks upon a man and he is looking good, if she is weak, she can trigger ovulation. Because remember, sexual response is an automatic response. And that's why the women dressed the way they did in front of the men, because they knew, say for instance, when a man is reading, or he's doing problem solving, or mathematics, and he's into whatever he's doing, he is more vulnerable sexually at that time than at any other time. So when the sisters dressed, they dressed humbly and made sure that they didn't mess with his brain. Because if they weren't ready for sex and got him ready for sex, then sex became a pathological exercise. That's when you start ending up with discharges. For the sexual act to come about, there has to be proponents. Different chemicals must be created in the body to protect against the end result of sex. The end result of sex is a man losing that seed. His seed equates to brain fluid. His sperm constitutes his brain fluid. So that's why they say you can't think out of both heads at the same time. You either use one or the other. So when your fluids are lost, that particular material that is used to create the continuance of our humanity is the same material that is used to create the spiritual continuance of humanity. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Why what? Yeah. The brain material is the seed. And so is the seed that gives life. You give life either to heaven, or what they call, to hell or earth, or you take it above the what? Solar, sun plexus, to heaven. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all the Bible ever talked about. Wasn't nobody coming to save your ass. All this bullshit. Brother had a question right here.
Oh, yeah, at the beginning of your lecture, you mentioned, at the beginning of your lecture, you started talking about the next 20 years. The next 20 years will be difficult.
Yes.
Can you explain that? What do you mean? You trying to say the mothership is coming, or what are you saying?
Well, let me just return to the primary ingredient here about mothership. A lot of people don't understand what the mothership means. Mothership means returning back or helping to resurrect the feminine principle. They have friendship, mothership. We have taken it out of context. The feminine principle must be resuscitated because she's too busy in the yang direction. That little symbol that you see with the black with the white dot, the white with the black dot, well, the black has then moved over to the white. And there's nothing over on that other side anymore. We're only operating on one polarity, and that's yang. The last 25 years, they say, you got to be positive, brothers and sisters. They forgot about the negative component. That's how nature operates. Positive means yang, going forward, ripping up to make sure that everything is still continuing. Negative means rest, reflection. We ain't stopped to do any rest and reflection at all. The woman never gets any rest anymore. And you know that there are 2 parts of this month, 2 times of the month when the woman is at her weakest point. She's still working and busting her ass through those times. Your great ancestors would have never done that shit. And if you were bleeding, you would have gone out into the huts where they had built, the women built, so that you would help to regenerate yourself. This nonsense about men being the ones that are afraid of menstrual cycles, that was bullshit. The women themselves were the ones who knew what that menstrual cycle meant. It was the fact that that menstrual cycle was the fall. That was part of the indication of the fall of man. And here, let me get this very straight with you all, too. The menstrual cycle is an indication that the internal power dynamics of the female is distorted. She was the one who actually kept the weather patterns in check. What's happening with our weather, people? You have to remember the Mut force. Anybody ever heard Mut or Mut? Well, the Mut force is undifferentiated power. Now, let me get you something here. The Mut force is what symbol? What is the symbol of the Mut? The vulture. What does the vulture feed on? Flesh, dead flesh. What is blood but liquid flesh? Which is all of the eggs, which is the seeds, which is the cells. Every time you bleed, sister, within I would say a year's period of time, you bleed enough blood, some sisters, to create a whole new human. That is not normal. It is not natural for you to lose your life force. Nowhere is there in the intelligence of the One Most High's mind, nowhere would the One Most High create a function that would represent the destabilization and the degeneration of its creation. The bleeding is a byproduct of our fall. When the great wars of the Neteru, Nibiru were taking place, it changed the whole atmosphere around this planet. And the compressed hydrogen orbit that we had a compressed hydrogen halo that surrounded our planet, that kept all of the differentiated energies that would come in from the suns and other star systems from plaguing or messing with the new life forms that were being created on our earth. We were in a kind of spiritual terrarium that was called Eden. In that particular Eden came the wars that caused the fall of this particular hydrogen, this compressed hydrogen halo. It was the fall of the firmament. Where do they depict it in the Bible? And what was it called? No. What was the event called? No. That was the part. But what was the event that created part of the fall? The flood. When the hydrogen halo or the canopy collapsed, it distorted the whole of the balance that Eden had. And it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. It didn't just rain water, it rained earth. And it rained all kinds of madness. It rained it was actually an electrostatic storm that took place when the hydrogen halo collapsed. Now, when that hydrogen halo came down, all of the protection that the human structure had was gone. And what we now operate with, right here, this body that we have now, is a biochemical perversion of what we once were. The different colors that we had, the pure, deep onyx black that gave off the green glow of the green humans, of the blue humans. See, what's happening is we could talk about us as dark folks being perfect because we got that melanin and we looking good and we black and beautiful, but we forget that there was a component to that is still missing. There's the hue that made you the hue man. Now, you may see it in some brothers and sisters like in Africa where they're so black they look blue. That is the components that are missing from the body. See, when we lost the magnesium molecule during the time of the great wars in heaven, we lost the fixing factor that kept the hemoglobin and the chlorophyll together in one body. We were able to process carbon dioxide much more efficiently than we do now. And the reason why carbon dioxide is poisonous to us is because of the fact that we don't have that chlorophyll component in our bodies anymore. Yes, because we fell. And if you look at the way the work to use the word fall, and this has nothing to do, beloved, if you're here new, with Dr. York. This is not his research through me. He may have researched it himself, then that's fine. But I did not get it from Dr. York, and I want that to be very clear to those brothers and sisters who are out there looking at this. I did my own research. Now, when you look at the fall, you look that after the great war in heaven that created the fall of the canopy, that disturbance created 4 environmental temperaments that you call seasons. Because there was only one season. The 4 seasons were created as a form of atmospheric balance to an earth that was spinning out of its axis. We were fixed around this orbit in order to maintain or rescue the life that was here. The little Edens, or these little glass domes and components that were set up to save those from the sun, because there was at least 2 or 3 suns back at that time. And at that time, it was balanced. You had an electrical sun, which is what is the only one that survived now, and you had a magnetic sun, which comprised the balance of life. Now you only have the electrical one, which creates death and havoc. But because we still have part of the component of our skin, we survive longer and better. The Caucasoid came from the caves. And it wasn't until they oriented the orbit around the sun that he could survive. That came up in your Leviticus. He told you who could go back out. Read Leviticus 13, 1 through 59. Now, when you are dealing with the fall, you look at all the seasons, and you take the place where we call autumn. Autumn is the time when Judas, quote unquote, during the time of Cancer, because see, Cancer is Judas in the 12 apostles. The crab denotes what they say as it's called the betrayal, because it's in Cancer that the sun begins its fall back towards winter. So the sun, which is the Son of God, reaches its zenith as well as begins its fall in Cancer. So Cancer denotes Judas, or the betrayal. Again, all this is analogy, brothers and sisters. When you reach that part of the time when you call it the fall season, what are the colors that the leaves become in this atmosphere here? Brown, red, yellow. Those are the primary colors of man. So we are essentially in a season of consciousness. We are in the fall of man. We are getting ready to go into the incubus, or the winter of man, for a season. It's going to be a short season. 20 years. About 20 years. But there will be a spring. And what started that? The hail bop. Which essentially is not hail bop, because like Sister Puma said, the Hopi had said this 300 years ago. They predicted the coming of a specific cometh, not comet, cometh. A China. The Kachina, the blue streaking star, which was supposed to have been a herald of the new time. Now, what did that do? The particular comet that passed us up and the one that's on its way, right behind it, the asteroid, yes, they ain't going to tell you about it because they don't want you to look up at the sky. They want you to pay attention to what they're going to be doing. Here's the other deal. When that happened, the sun tilted 17 degrees in its axis. And what does that mean? It changed the frequency dynamic of consciousness for us. 17-degree. And what that 17-degree shift in the sun did was shift us at least 5 or 6 degrees. So that now you have El Nino again. This time, worse and worse and worse. Every 5 or 6 years, they say, worse and worse and worse. But guess what? Anybody who's from Mexico or who is Spanish, what does El Nino mean? The child or the little boy. What is the other part of his meaning? It means Jesus. Now remember, I told you that the first pollution on this planet was thought pollution. And thought pollution actually dictates the weather. Now, if the second coming is to rescue us, and Jesus is supposed to purport the second coming, then what's happening with all this weather? And who they say blames it? El Nino. So you got your second coming. It's you, your thought processes, and how you affect the weather, and how that particular dynamic changes the degrees of your consciousness perception, so that you may now filter in the information necessary for you to break this ceiling. But guess what? There are proponents around us that are trying to maintain the ceiling. And that's the enemy. That's the adversary. Yes, brother?
She made a statement about Mr. Chino.
Yes.
I thought that was kind of interesting because, you know, of course, as more, we do a lot of research,
Mhm.
reporting, as you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with Esteban, Esteban was the explorer for Europeans.
Yes.
But when he came in contact with the Zuni,
Mm-hmm.
right, the Zuni made a Kachina doll
Yes.
out of the wall.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of interesting
But-
how you're connected.
But see, how beautiful this is now is that the ship that they just sent up with all that plutonium is the Cassini. And you talk about an analogy and a analog in your voice, or not an analog, but a what is that word when it sounds? A synonym, and using like pronunciations. Remember that amount, that's 75 pounds of plutonium or whatever that is now being shot around Venus. It's supposed to be shot around the Earth. If that bad boy dips just by 1 or 2 degrees, we could wipe out the whole population of Africa because they're passing it over Africa. Anyway, brothers, I was given a signal, and sisters, I was given a signal for a time, and if there's any last or final questions. Okay, wait a minute, let the sister ask. Let me just have about 4 more questions and we can go forward. Sister? Mm-hmm.
On what if you was going to an art school and they lost your whole portfolio? And when you talk to them and ask them what happened to your work, they look at you like you're crazy. Tell you that you never gave it to them. And when you go to the president of the school, the president, you don't get any justice from there, and you don't get no kind of recognition or acknowledgement. And you want to sue them.
Now you have to talk to the Morris brothers on that one. Yeah, we have to talk to them on that. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, also, you have mentioned something about the menstrual cycle.
Yes.
Now, I feel you're a very knowledgeable brother, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but now
Mhm.
I'm put it out here. Do any of you remember Salem's Lot
Yes.
with Massachusetts?
Yes.
Now, I was listening to a lecture similar to what you're saying now, Phil,
Mhm.
and what hit me heavy is when you started talking about the menstrual cycle of the women,
Mm-hmm.
what the European male did not understood is when they came in contact with the African woman who was a vegetarian, she did not believe.
That's right.
Why? You know that the male European relied on blood for his survival.
Exactly.
Protein, right? So when at the 30-day cycle or 28 cycle that the female would give off a menstrual blood, as the white woman did, he recognized that the black woman didn't do that. So automatically he thought she was a witch.
Yeah.
So he started taking these instruments.
To start her blood up. Yeah. Right. And that, you see, the thing about it is, the first witch burned was a black woman.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
The first witch burned in Salem was a black woman. And she was a vegetarian who taught the aesthetic ways of women. In other words, women had a science all their own that made them how powerful they were. You did not do the things that men did because they understood that they would be abdicating their power. Once you take off a skirt and you don't wear the skirt, which is essentially like what's her name said, it's the pyramid. If you look at the skirt, it's the pyramid. And inside of it, you're talking about, well, it's too cold in winter. You layer it. But the pants, essentially, sisters, is made for males because we can create heat better than you can. The heat we have is created because our lungs are larger, so we can combust more oxygen. We have denser flesh. So estrogen is not a very good component of making heat. If you have brown fat in your body, which is made from all this meat and protein, then you could probably make a lot of heat. But if you are a vegetarian, you make more of what is known as the yellow fat, which needs insulation to help you to create the heat. But the yellow fat is better for keeping the organs primed and keeping you nurtured in your womb, and you don't bleed. So there is a science to being woman, and that science is lost because of her pursuit of things that were essentially artificial anyway. This thing called a career. The word career, listen to me carefully, the word career extrapolates etymologically from the word combat. Let me repeat that. If you work and look at the word career and you follow the etymological trail for that word, it goes back to the word combat. I don't have to say anything else. The other question was over here. Oh, no, there was another question somewhere in there. Okay, well, all right, sister. The snake. That is the symbol of the snake. The Kundalini, remember when I said that Adam was perfect? And that they said that Eve was made from the rib? Well, if you look at a cell as it begins to come apart, you will see that there are specific ribs created as it becomes two. The daughter cell is essentially Eve. That's why Eve was created. It's just the separation of the one from the two. I mean, from the two from the one. When Adam was perfect and perfection became his own prison and thus his death, he had to break free. And in the breaking free, he emancipated all potential within him. Okay? That's why Eve was left. Eve is essentially supposed to be the archetypal structure that he attains back to his perfection. She keeps the matrix of perfection by keeping a healthy womb. Sick wombs create sick children. Okay? Now, the Kundalini was introduced into the garden. What was that? The snake. The serpentine fire, the one that agitated with that which was perfect, breaking that perfection to start or to initiate the perfecting principle. So when you begin to see Kundalini and the sexual energies that are used to either feed heaven or hell, that's what Lot is. Lot is the lotus. L-O-T is L-O-T-U-S. The lotus stalk. When Lot's wife turned back, which was the energy that goes up the spine automatically in Kundalini, that's Lot's wife. Lot is the stalk, or the Sushumna, or the Ida and the Pingala nerves, or what they call the River Jordan, which is the seminal fluid and the spinal fluid that goes up the spine. That's what all your Bible is about, is breaking down the map of the human structure. So when you deal with the Kundalini energy going up the spine, if you turn that energy backwards into sexual generation, that's Lot's wife looking back, and thereby turning into a pillar of salt. What is salt? A mineral. What is your sperm comprised of? salt, minerals. Hello, people. When you get out of the bullshit that religion is telling you and you get into the science that was the thing that set up the religion, then you free yourself from the last great bastion of slavery, and that is religious ignorance. So, one more question, brother. Okay.
I heard that basically, well, not basically, but I heard in one of the genocide reforms is that they're so-called putting something in the synthetic hair to, I don't know, make the women sterile now, I heard.
Well, I don't doubt it. Remember, there is a war going on to cause our sisters, who they know. You can look at it now. You see our sisters now who are being put next to very strong white anchormen. And they look so grateful being there. Roz Abrams just really pisses me off with that.
One early in the morning,
Cheryl Washington, and there's this grateful acceptance. But you have to understand that the Caucasoid knows that his time is limited on the planet, that he has made a projection that within the next 25 years, his seed will have been completely nullified. Because remember, between 1945 and 1960, or 1990, his sperm count dropped 60%. And it's still going down now. And as a result of that dropping, he now has to find a womb. Now, you got to remember now, the feminist, check her out now. You got to remember that what caused the matriarchy to fall was the womb extortion scenario. We men have one imperative, and that's to continue. That imperative to continue the strain, the individual strain, causes us to be combative and competitive. Competition is a man thing. That's why you all sisters playing basketball and doing all, that is so not you. Competition helps testosterone to be active so that we become better provider protectors. But what happens now is that you have become in that syndrome. You have fallen into that syndrome. Okay? When the time comes for you to, so I'm going to get this real simple so that you could understand it. The physical body of the female has components that regulates its activity from inside. That's why she needs to feel more than she needs to think. Because her structures and her nervous system is so advanced. If that is gone, she becomes susceptible to whatever disease that she can no longer feel is happening in her body. Most women who come to me today say, well, I didn't even know it was happening. It just came like that. If you were back in the times, you would have known when it was beginning. You can tell when you're ready to cycle. You can tell when you're ovulating. The only way you can tell when you're ovulating now is when you get miserable, or when you get agitated, or when there's just something about you that just don't feel right. That's not how you ovulated, sisters. You ovulated because you wanted to back then. Ovulation is so taxing on the body that it was it was not a mandatory thing by no moon. It was something you did when you were ready to procreate. See, that's another science that's gone all together. The sisters did specific types of meditations to start the egg being made. And you made your estrogen another way altogether, because the whole body was the estrogen-making component. Well, the Immaculate Conception is another fallacy that we got to go through, brother, but we don't have the time right now. I done lost my trend. Where was I when I started out? The actual Immaculate Conception is a pathology. Okay? Anytime a woman can create a baby by herself, it means she has more man in her than the physical law allows. There is no way for a gynic, pure woman to create the electrothermal dynamics in her body to self-fertilize, unless she has a masculine component that creates that dynamic already in her. Because if you look at the egg, it ain't swimming nowhere. What is it doing? It's just there, waiting to be activated. Now, like I was saying, the man needs to continue. He has an imperative to continue. So womb distortion had it when the women were ruling, that if he needs to continue, he needs a place to continue. Womb extortion had it that if you wanted to continue, if you wanted to borrow this, there are certain things that you must be for me. So you had to prove that you could take care of me and make sure that the seed of this womb can be taken care of as well. So the dynamic of the male is to continue. He will do anything. He'll give you the sweetest rap. He will even stoop to rape because of that imperative. Women knew that, and that's how they controlled. That's when the womb was superior. But see, it turned around and backfired on them. That's when you call matriarchy, patriarchy. There was no such thing as matriarchy and patriarchy. That's bullshit. Whenever the dynamics of survival for a society fell on the hands or the shoulders of one sex, it became a matriarchy. But it never actually started with the feminine principle, because all societies start with war. Today, and about 10,000 years ago, there was always conflict. And it was the masculine conflict, the masculine survivors of that conflict, that established the hierarchy of rule. So if the feminine principle came from that and became queens, it was a result of that. Anyone who warred with a queen was essentially warring because they had their dedication to that lineage of rulership. But it did not start with the queen, and that thing about there being a feminine universe, and the universe was feminine, and when the universe is masculine, that's a lot of bullshit. The universe is a balancing dynamic, and it is man that goes through these changes of masculine and feminine power. And we got to get out of that thing where there was primary female rulership, primary male rulership. The both of them were consistent. Exactly. They were there, and depending on the dynamics necessary for creation, that which was matter, all of this, anything that is matter, anything that can be felt and cognized, is female. Anything that you use, anything you can consistently perceive of, is female. The activating presence that gives life to that perception and necessity is male. So never in any, and that's what I say about the Moorish principle as well. Some brothers and Moors who are saying that the female is the power, and we're going back into that dynamic again. There's no such thing as feminine power and masculine power. That's bullshit. We're just making another schism because of the fact we can't process that higher dynamic and know that there is a balance of that. And once we understand the science behind the balance, there is no leader or rulership. There is just what must be done to create the balance. With that, I didn't get a chance to cover as... Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, if you look at the dynamic of all the sisters, and if you see some grateful brothers, most of them have to talk nasal for them to actually get over anyway. You are looking at the fact that the Caucasoid knows that he needs to secure the womb